Welcome to Invest Out West podcast. I'm Nat Micken.
And I'm Kahlia Micken. We are a husband and wife team who live and invest in Western Queensland.
Join us on our journey of creating passive income through mindset, business, crypto, and property investing. Welcome to Invest Out West episode number 57.
The quote we'd like to leave with today comes from Socrates, where he says, "Education is the kindling of a flame, not the filling of a vessel."
Yeah, so the 2026 budget has been announced.
The Australian federal budget, that is.
Yeah, the Australian federal budget. So this is a couple of days after
the budget was released on Tuesday night, and we're recording on Friday afternoon.
Which is the day after the reply budget has come from the opposition to both the coalitions and One Nation's budgets were dropped last night as well. Now, we haven't really had a chance to look through them as we speak, but I thought we'd just jump on here and dig in a bit to the actual budget, Labor's budget. So, it's quite a controversial subject, to say the least. It was spruiked up as a budget for young people and young home buyers, that sort of thing, which I think is about the furthest from the truth you could possibly get. Looking at what they've done.
So the term that they were pushing leading into the budget, it was coming out in nearly every single speech that the parliamentarians gave, was that they were seeking intergenerational equity. And as soon as you hear that terminology, you know full well what it means. It means that they want to take the money off those who have worked hard all their life, and they want to give it back to, technically the dole bludgers and the younger generation who aren't striving to have the same aspiration that the older generation had. And so that is what the government constantly that's how they kept leaking their budget, so to speak, leading into the budget night, was to say we want intergenerational equity, and we're going to make it fairer for young Australians to get into the housing market. And the leaks just kept coming and coming and coming, and it was even right up onto the morning. So Tuesday morning there were still more leaks coming out, and I think the government deliberately did that because it sort of was like this buffer, and so they just like to drip feed all this really bad stuff, and then hope that they were hoping like heck that it wouldn't have a huge effect come Tuesday night and the following days. But a huge effect it has been, and the backlash has been something like we've never seen.
Yeah, it's been quite brutal, and rightly so, because the fact of the matter is that they lied, and
absolutely.
They went to the last election saying that there'd be no changes on capital gains tax and negative gearing systems. And both of them things were thrown out in the one night. Like it was, and it was just like as though that they sort of looked at everybody trying to pull them up on it, as though that they did nothing wrong. And well, there's so much footage of the in the past when they've been asked on those particular topics, and like there's the footage we all know of with Albanese saying for the 50th time, no, I'm not gonna change the capital gains tax and the negative gearing arrangements. So it's a complete lie what they went to their last election with. And without getting sort of too political, we do have to follow the politics of this, because it is such a hot political topic. But Bill Shorten in 2019 election, he went to the election with these type of policies in place, saying that he was gonna change things around, and he took it to the election, and that was when Scott Morrison won the unwinnable election. And so that proved straight up that these changes weren't wanted, and haven't been wanted for forever, basically. I don't know really what they were thinking to just lob it on to Australians without letting us have a say on it.
Well, see, this is it. When Labor got in 2022,
Yeah,
2022,
I
when
think so.
Morrison got out, that there was a lot of pressure on them then about these negative gearing changes and the capital gains tax changes, and they
because there'd been because they went to the last election with those policies.
Yeah, because
so,
Bill Shorten put it out there. And at the time, I didn't have a lot of time for Bill Shorten, as a potential prime minister. Obviously, he's on the opposite side of politics to what we reside on. I didn't have a lot of time for him. But now that we've got Anthony Albanese with Jim Chalmers, as part of his under his wing, you realise just how good Bill Shorten truly would have been, because he was transparent. And that's exactly what we haven't seen with Albanese and Chalmers, is the fact that they said, no, called journalists out and all the rest of it, and snapped at them saying they weren't going to touch these two policies. And so now they're into their second term. And it was only, I think it was 12 months ago, I think was when they were snapping at the,
still saying no.
at the journalists, saying no, we're not touching it. And here we are, this budget, they think that they've got all the power that they need, and they just think that they're invincible.
They just run over the top of the Australian people.
They're the definition of socialists. This is what socialist.
It was a socialist budget.
Yeah, very much so. And we've known ever since Anthony Albanese became Prime Minister of Australia that he comes from the far left of the Labor Party, which is the socialist wing of the Labor Party. And if you look back onto all of his younger days, when he was when he first started out into Parliament, when he was like what was the term, is like a youth fighter or justice fighter or words to that effect, he always had socialist point of views. And there's clips of him talking of, this is Anthony Albanese, before he was Prime Minister, of him talking about, how he wanted to leverage capital gains because he obsesses over the wealth that the older generation carry in Australia, and he's just obsessed with it. And just on the topic of this word socialist, I'm not sure if everyone's familiar of Javier Milei. Is that Javier?
Yeah, Javier Milei, I think.
President of Argentina. He's a conservative, and he turfed out the socialists. He turfed out the very, very bad government in Argentina, and he's trying to get Argentina's economy back on track. But he said the way he describes socialists is, he says that socialists propose distribution of wealth because they are not capable of creating it themselves. And that's exactly what we are seeing here. They want to shift the wealth away from people who have strived for it, people who have worked their guts out to build up their own nest egg, to build up that portfolio that they've wanted.
Taking all the risk.
Yeah, taking all the risk. Now they're just wanting to take it off those people and pass it to the younger generation. So this is how it was portrayed. But when we start to dig deeper into the policies, it warps our mind. Every night, I shouldn't say every night, but multiple times a day, we'll sit down and have a confab about something else that we've heard about what they're doing, and it boggles the mind.
This is how we sort of started. It was how we started this podcast. It was a budget for young people, and yet nothing about it is a budget for young people. It's actually worse for young people with these changes in place.
Yeah, see, really what they're doing, so young people, we fall into this category. We're in our mid-30s, so we fall into this young people category, and this budget specifically targets us, because what they're doing is they are targeting aspirational Australians, and that's what we are. So we've started to build a portfolio, we've started to build a nest egg, we've got assets behind us, but we're still building. We haven't reached the top. Those who have reached where they want to go with their portfolio, those who have reached the top, those who have finished as such they're building up in their investing journey, they're not impacted. It's us who are still building. We are the ones who are impacted, and it boggles the mind.
I think us specifically, like you and I, are less impacted than a lot of other young people, even because we're already started so far down the journey. Those in the next generation below us who haven't even started. You cry for them, because they. I guess all you can hope is that there would be changes that would come in on the track, which would give them hope. But at the moment, it blows my mind. It doesn't really look good.
No, it doesn't
for the real young people at all.
No.
I suppose I suppose we should sort of start to mention I guess there's four major changes that are coming into place with this budget. So
yeah, and I'll just lead in by saying before Nat starts that anything that we share here is just our opinions and the way that we're interpreting it. We're not giving financial advice. We're not trying to to portray anything. We're just simply sharing.
Even more so, like we don't really understand yet the full impact. So we're sort of only talking about what we know and what we've.
Well, yeah, nobody understands.
Nobody understands.
We follow a lot of heavy hitting, especially like property investors, and that they are just tearing their hair out. Like
they still don't even know.
It is mind blowing.
So what hope are the rest of us got? So like Kahlia says, take everything we say here with a grain of salt, because one, we don't, me and Kahlia and I don't really fully understand yet. Two, nobody understands yet the full impacts. And three, these rules could get changed before they're actually implemented, because none of this is actually implemented yet. It still has to go through Parliament, and these are only sort of outlines at the time being. So, okay, so I suppose the big one that, well, I guess they're all big, but probably the big one that everybody's talking about is the negative gearing. Now, I'll start off by saying a lot of these, well, a fair bit of this budget doesn't actually affect us personally.
At the moment.
At the moment.
Yeah, because like on the portfolio that we already hold, but moving forward, it will.
Things will change for us moving forward.
Well, hang on. I will just come in and say it does impact us at the moment because of how we've structured our portfolio.
Our structure.
We'll touch on that after a bit.
Yeah, we'll touch on that.
Yeah.
But I guess that's, well, to list these four things off. So the negative gearing changes, capital gains tax changes, the tax on trusts changes, and then also the pre-1985 assets that didn't have capital gains applied
the exemption.
To them.
Yeah,
that's sort of the four things that have really been targeted in this budget. Now, what we're sort of going to talk about here is all property focused, because that is sort of our main focus of our asset base, I suppose. And so a lot of these rules do apply to the share market and that sort of thing. But because we don't have a lot riding on the share market, and so therefore these rules aren't really going to play a big factor into into our share portfolio, for instance. They're more going to affect our property portfolio. So that's why we're sort of talking about this from a property focus point.
Yeah, and also business, because it also impacts small businesses. So any companies that were starting up and that were venture capital companies, they are just going to get absolutely wiped because of the way they're changing these capital gains and the trust structures. It's just blows my mind. Any aspiration, I guess that is the only way to capture it all, is to say any aspiration you've got, the government wants to hit you in the shins for it. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. So I guess for anybody who doesn't know the details about these four changes, and like I said before, this is to the best of our knowledge, and it's probably going to change in the future and before they finally get their policy sorted out. But at the moment, negative gearing changes stand at that all properties that are negative geared in the past up until budget night are still going to be still going to have that negative gearing in place. That'll be grandfathered in, so there'll be no changes there. It's only going to affect properties from the 1st of July next year that will I should say any properties that were bought after budget night, after 7:30 budget night.
Yeah, any properties that went to contract.
Yeah, went to contract.
So if there was a property under contract, it was protected.
That'll still be protected.
But anything that wasn't under contract.
Yeah. So that will mean that if you go and settle on a property today and you want it to be negative geared, you'll only have 12 odd months of that negative gearing that will able to take place until mid next year, when it'll have to be reversed. So that's the negative gearing one. The capital gains tax one, that's from what I've followed and watched on YouTube, and that is a absolute legal nightmare. Nobody seems to sort of still be able to understand just what that means moving forward, because that's going to go back to being indexed to inflation, which is a good idea in itself for some scenarios, but it's not a one size fits all. So like up until now, if you held a property or any asset for more than 12 months, after the 12-month mark, your capital gains halved. So your capital gains tax halved. So it was a good idea for the likes of somebody who was flipping properties, for instance, and that's something that we were going to start to get into in the future, where we would flip properties, but flip them in a 12-month or like a 13-month time frame. So
yeah, so just so in case anyone was in a position that we were in a few years ago, if you're there scratching your head saying, what are you talking about? So just to give an example of what Nat's talking about the capital gains being halved. So say you buy a property for $100,000, you hold it for more than 12 months, you sell that property then for say $200,000, you've got a $100,000 gain in the middle. Okay, so because you've held that for more than 12 months, you were eligible to only be taxed on 50% of that $100,000 gain. Now you will be taxed on 100% of that $100,000 gain.
yeah, so in that example, you would be like you used to be taxed only on $50,000.
$50,000, yeah,
$50,000,
yeah.
whereas now you'll be taxed on $100,000.
Yeah.
So straight up, there's more money to be taxed.
And the thing to point out too is capital gains. The way they tax capital gains, there's no set tax rate.
No.
It gets added to your income, and then whatever tax bracket you fall into, that's the tax amount that you pay. And of course, now that they've brought it back to being 100% of your gains, you can imagine how much that's going to punch people up the tax ladder. Yeah,
and they're talking about 30%, 30% minimum.
yeah.
Minimum rate. So that's a starting point, is 30% taxed on that capital gain. So in Kahlia's example, it'll be 30% starting point
Yeah.
on $100,000 of that capital gain. So which it's incredible, like the numbers that you start to talk about in extra tax when you're talking about bigger and bigger values.
Yeah. So just to give some context, of how we were impacted by capital gains in the previous financial year to what we're in now. We had our house in Julia Creek that lost its roof, in a storm. We paid a little bit over $50,000 for that asset, and we lost it, what was it, 3 years later?
I think it was 3
years later. The roof went off it, and the insurance wrote it off, so they paid us out. Well, we got paid out a whack for what that house was insured for, because they paid us, technically what it would be to replace it. So we went from 50,000 to this. We had this significant gain in the middle, and we sit down and we think, imagine if we didn't, if we weren't capable of leveraging the 50% capital gains tax, it would have just absolutely wiped us. Like it was, it boggles the mind. Yeah.
And like in that example, like houses in Julia Creek like went stupid in that
They
3
did,
years.
yeah.
They were like it was well over double. Everything went up. Like even the most basic of houses went up over double in that time.
Yeah.
And so, the capital gains tax is always a noose around an investor's neck, but it's even going to be more so now with this 30% base that they're talking about. I think that's where the problem lies. So then getting on to the next big thing, which tax on trusts. That's also,
it is just criminal, this one. Yeah.
Because trusts have been used as a way of minimizing tax, like trying to hang on to as much of the capital gains as possible. Trusts have always been used for that purpose, and now they're talking about the same 30% minimum capital gains being slapped on a trust, just like everything else. So there's talk now that it might be companies like a company structure that will be the best way of buying property in the future. So
yeah, well, see, it makes sense because like the trust structure was set up for a tax purpose. That's why we buy property in a trust structure, and I guess asset protection is another. It is another avenue, but it doesn't quite hold as much water as what it used to. But and this is the thing: if they've just changed the tax rate on trust to be the same as companies, so why would you set up in a trust now?
All you got
There's
is
so
more
much to
accounting
weigh up.
fees and all that, setup fees. So trusts are going to be nowhere near as lucrative as what they once were. So that's that. And then the number 4 was the pre 1985 capital gains tax. That was another Labor idea, capital gains tax to start with, and that was brought in 1985 by the Hawke-Keating government. Same story back then, was grandfathered in to like any properties purchased before 1985 held or had an exemption on capital gains until the sale of that asset, and then that's when it reset and started with capital gains, like with the new owner. So in this budget, that's also looks like it's going to be thrown out, and capital gains tax are now going to start on the 1st of July next year, and start from that date. So there's a lot of confusion around that. I've been finding because they're talking that they're going to have to be evaluated on or around that 1st of July to find a base to start with for the capital gains moving forward. So,
so that's 1st of July 2027. So it's it's
we've got over 12 months. And I think there's going to be a lot of properties being shuffled around, and a lot of assets in general being shuffled around over the next sort of 12 odd months, 13 months, until this happens, because family farms, family businesses, family property, like some of these, like there might have been a shop or something that's been in the family since 1975, and it's suddenly now, mum and dad and grandma and grandpa and the kids have all got to sort of get together and say, okay, well, we better work out what we're going to do in the next 12 months with this asset that might have been bought for a few pennies on the dollar back then, and now it might be worth millions, and it all has to be put into a better structure moving forward to get the best outcome.
Yeah, and like you think of what our base is. So our base, of course, is agriculture. We've got beef cattle stations. So if you go back to that base, you think of the amount of properties, just the people that we know who have owned that land since well before 1985, and they go through what we call succession planning. So it gets like handed down to the next generation. That was all exempt from this capital gains tax, and you can imagine, the values. Say if somebody did buy a property in the 80s, you can imagine the value of what it was back then to the value of what it is today in 2026. Like we are talking literally tens of millions of dollars just in gains alone that they are now going to be taxed on. And then it goes back even further. You think of the fellows that were our war veterans, for example. They went to war, they played their part, they came back to Australia, and they were gifted the land from the government to actually, build Australia up again. Like that, when they're gifted that, it comes with a $0 purchase price fee. And say if a property that they're gifted is now, 15, 20, $30 million, and they go to sell it or transfer it or whatever it looks like, the whole lot now is going to be under capital gains. And it just, it warps the mind.
It's a completely different ball game. And I think that's why the government's given us 12 months a bit over 12 months to.
But even that's not enough time.
No, it's not enough
like
time.
It's just pathetic. It really is. Yeah.
But I think there's going to be a lot of accountants and a lot of solicitors and a lot of property valuers and everybody's going to be working pretty hard over the next 12 months, I think.
Yeah.
Trying to get all this sorted out before D-Day. So, yeah. So like I said before, a lot of this doesn't affect us. Like well, for example, we don't negative gear, so that doesn't affect us. We're not in the business of selling. We're only in the business of buying properties. So like we're a net buyer. So a lot of the capital gains on the selling won't sort of affect us all that much because we don't usually sell. It's only sort of in extreme circumstances where we'll sell. And then the pre-1985 exemption, well, we don't own any properties since 1985. Well, we weren't even around in 1985. Those three things don't really affect us at the moment. It's the biggest thing that's going to affect us is the trust structure, which we have so many trusts across all our different asset classes. That's something that we're definitely going to need to look at moving forward. And we had a meeting with our accountant only, what was it, week before last? Or was it last week?
Yeah, just last week, I think.
Last week. We were talking about, the next properties that we buy and setting up more trusts, more trusts for those properties and that sort of thing, and sort of, just working out how we're going to sort of do it moving forward. And I just said to Kahlia this morning, I said, we really got to go and have another meeting with him and start all over again, because all that what we sort of discussed, a lot of that is now out the window, because it was before this budget. It's an incredible amount of stuff that everybody's got to get their head around.
Incredible.
Over the next 12 months.
Yeah. And this is the thing, like it's a real, a hit below the belt, so to speak, because what they, they, meaning Jim Chalmers in his budget night speech, is like, this is a responsible budget. This is a budget for reform. all these flashy words, but this isn't a reformist budget.
No,
this is a tax grab. This is just a way of seeing where the wealth is, because there is so much wealth in Australia tied up with retirees and small business owners and mum and dad investors and these things. And then it's like, oh look, there's a money pot. How can we hit them the hardest? And it's just a way, because the Labor government is such a high spending government that they just all they're worried about is the dollar signs in front of them.
And this is what I sort of like first started off with, that it's not a budget for young people at all, because of this grandfathering clause. This is what's really got me scratching my head, is because of this grandfathering clause, that negative geared properties that have been negative geared can be continued to be negative geared until the future, or into the future, up until whenever it gets sold. Now you can see what they're doing there, because like people that have already bought on that system of, on the government of the day, they shouldn't be penalised for a change of policy. So that's fair that they've left that in place for people that have already doing that. But to take that away from young people into the future, that's what has really got me scratching my head, is that it's like a case of, oh, okay, we're going to let, the boomers and all the generations before negative gear up until now, but then the young millennials and the generations below them, when they want to get into property, and the only way they can do it is through negative gear, and that's the only way that they can make the numbers pencil, the government comes along and knocks that on the head and says, no, you can't do that. So to me, I'm like, okay, so you're trying to target the old people. You're trying to what do you call it? Like tax or penalise.
Yeah.
Penalise is the word I was looking for. So penalise the old people to let the young people have a better go, but it's actually the other way around. You're actually penalising the young people and letting the old people continue on as normal. So, like, to me, it's completely back to front.
Yeah, and see, the thing is, with most of the housing supply being in capital cities, heavily populated areas, there's a strategy that a lot of those property coaches, let's call them, push for those city residing investors, and that is it's called rent vesting. So that means that you want to live in a certain area. So let's use the example of Sydney. You want to live in some affluent suburb, let's say Bondi, for example, but you know that you can't afford to actually buy a property in that suburb. It's where you would like to choose to live, but you can't buy a property. So what they encourage people to do is say, right, I will buy a house in a less prosperous suburb, on the outer fringes somewhere, and then rent something in the suburb that you want to live in, Bondi in this example, and then and then they use their negatively geared system to then pay down this other investment property that they've bought. And that's exactly what they have taken away from people who aren't on the property ladder yet, because they can't get their foot in the door now. And see, when they could when they were using the negatively gearing strategy, it would give them like a spread, so to speak. Like, it would give them like a serviceability spread, so the banks would actually look at them, even though when they invest into a property, it's actually taking money out of their pocket. The banks still take into account the strategy of being negatively geared, and now they've lost that. So if you can't pay for that property out of your own pocket, well, that's it. You're wiped. There is no lower lug for you to step on to get into the property investment space. Like, it just
because the banks would look at that and say, oh well, because of this tax offset, we can lend you more money. So that's a big thing that they're all saying now, is that serviceability and lending, like lending ability, is now gone down because of these new rules. So I don't understand how they think that is going to make buying property less more attractive.
And see, the government thinks that the government pushes that there is a housing supply crisis, that there's not enough supply. This is their big push. But how is this going to make more supply? Anybody who already owns the property, who potentially might have had a buy and sell or flipping strategy, they're not going to do that now, because they're going to lose the tax benefits that come with that. And the thing is because now, if they remove negatively gearing from properties, like already established properties, people who have got to be able to afford that property out of their own pocket, so to speak, like, they're going to put their rent prices through the roof. And so how is this going to fix the housing supply? It is just, it boggles the mind. Yeah.
It's the only way that you can make the deal pencil now, because why would you go and buy property that you're losing money on every single day without a tax benefit or some benefit of being able to pay for it.
And see, it even goes beyond using just a negatively gearing strategy. It goes into the capital gain strategy as well, because talking in city investments into property, most of the time the rents don't cover the purchase, like cover the repayments for the property. So the city investors focus on capital growth. So say they own their property, it was 12 months, so own their property for more than 12 months, they would then normally sell that and pull out that extra equity that they built up in the 12 months and then go again. Well, they're not going to be able to do that now, because that equity is going to vaporize because of the extra tax you're paying on that capital gain. Like, there's
and there's a lot of people starting to say that supply is going to tighten up.
Oh, it's going to be massively tightened.
On existing properties, because anybody who's got their negative gearing locked in, well, there's no way in the wide world that they're going to sell to then go and buy another property or some other asset that they're not going to be able to negatively gear. So them negative geared properties are going to be held on to uphill and down dale, because because it's going to be more beneficial to hold them rather than sell them. So then, therefore, that takes more supply out of the market. Now, we should just mention that new builds, so in these new rules, so new builds are going to still be able to have the negative gearing applied to them and still have the 50% capital gains tax applied to them. But that's on new builds only. And that's on either vacant land or a housing like development or something like that.
New release land.
Yeah, new release land or a knockdown and rebuild of more houses. So if you buy a old house, like existing house that you just want to sort of buy because it's got a good location, and you knock it down and build one house in its place, well, that's not included in these new rules. No. But if you knocked down the one house and build a duplex, for instance, that is increasing supply. So therefore, you're going to be able to have these benefits. Now, one thing about that, or a couple of things about that, is that smart money will not touch new developments like house and land packages, off the plan sort of stuff. That's just something that horror stories are made out of.
Yeah, it carries far too much risk.
Yeah. And the trouble is that you're buying it's like buying a new car. Like, it loses like 30% of its value the moment you drive it off the showroom floor. And houses are a bit the same. A lot of that value is lost in them first few years, and then the value sort of plateaus out for the next couple, and then it goes back up again after that. Smart money knows this, and that's why they don't touch new builds and off the plan sort of stuff, because that's not where the big money is made. So they might suck in a few newbies and that sort of thing with these schemes, but the actual seasoned investor isn't going to fall for that at all. Now, another thing that I've been hearing is that builders are already sticking up their prices by they're talking 5 to 10% already, because they know that there's going to be a big influx of new builds coming. So straight up, there's you're going to have higher building costs on these houses that aren't actually worth that price, because the builders have stuck the price up because they know they're going to have more demand. And we saw that in COVID and that already. Like, as soon as that there's a higher demand, then the building costs go up, which means that the finished product is more expensive, and then it's actually worth more, like on paper, than what the asset is actually worth on the ground. So that's really, like, you can see what they're doing there. They're trying to give you some lollipops to create more supply, but the real investors aren't gonna play that game.
And it cuts out young investors. It cuts out mum and dads. Like, fair enough for, these massive corporate developers, they can go into the city and knock an old building down and big, high-rise apartments there, and they'd be able to negatively gear that. But no ma and pa can do that.
And the same even with replacing one with two and that sort of thing. So, like, a seasoned investor, or just an older person with a bit of money behind them, they can go and buy the house, the old house there on the corner block that's got a good location for, call it 800,000 and knock it over, and then build a duplex for 2 million and sell off one and keep the other one and take these benefits along the way. But what young person is going to be able to pull that on from the word go? That's impossible. And what we were talking about the rents there before, like, the only way that anybody's going to be able to hold these negative geared properties is to jack the rents up to make up the shortfall. And so therefore, any young person who's renting now is now going to have to pay more in rent. So that's going to dig into their savings of their deposit that they're diligently trying to put away. So straight away, that one rules out the other, and you're just back to square one. So
And like it's quite disappointing to see. Like Australia is already in these massively tight, recessive times. There's talk of recessions on the horizon for Australia. The government just one of their most favourite sayings is the cost of living. Everybody knows how much the cost of living has just gone absolutely through the roof. And now they go and bring out this policy where landlords can't leverage other ways to have a decent investment. We as landlords are going to have to put our rates up. Well, who's that targeting? It's targeting these ones who are crying the hardest about the cost of living.
Yeah,
like
you just go around in circles.
Like the dots just don't join up here.
No, not at all. And Oz Chalmers could say, like, when he got up there, like the first 10 minutes was all about the war and the war in the Middle East, and I was wondering whether people were starting to play a drinking game at home, where every time he mentioned the war, they'd take another sip. And
I think I heard somewhere where he said it 14 times in a row.
Yeah, it was just ridiculous.
It's insane.
Yeah.
The war has nothing to do with this.
No,
the war,
inflation was out of control in Australia long before the war. And
this is the war in Iran, by the way, between Trump and Iran.
So
it's not even Australia's war, and the government's just leveraging it like you would not believe.
And I thought as soon as that war sort of kicked off, I thought, oh yeah, I know what the Australian government, they'd be rubbing their hands together in glee, thinking that they've got a new excuse to pin their shortcomings on something else, and that's exactly what it was. So, I guess we sort of start to wrap this up. So, probably a couple of finishing points that I'll make is that there will be loopholes in all this. It's just going to take time to find them, and it's going to take good accountants and good solicitors that you're going to have to pay well to find these loopholes that will be there. All that really does is that those who do know, like who are experienced and do know that there will be loopholes, and also have the money to pay for good accountants and solicitors to find these loopholes, they'll be the ones that will benefit from these loopholes. Whereas your average mum and dad investor, or your young person even more so, starting out, has no concept about these loopholes that will be there. So I really think that it sort of it puts the onus back on us as investors to look for these loopholes that will need to, that will, you could say exploit, but it's not exploiting, because if the opportunity is there and it's been penciled into the rules, then it's there to be used. So
and the fact is, it is not the government's money that they are taking. It is our money. We are the hardworking Australians. We are the aspirational Australians who they're hitting. We are the investors. It's our capital. We're the ones who are paying the loans down, not the government. And this is it. They're not. We're not evading tax. We are just working the tax system.
Yeah. And this is always the thing with governments. They have this. They have this idea that it's their money, and they've got a right to it, and they've got a right to spend it however they please, and it doesn't, apparently it doesn't matter at all about the taxpayer, and which it does matter about the taxpayer, because we're the ones who are giving them the money in the first place. So yeah, that's one point on there, and I think
just on that, just on the it being our money, there was a headline, I can't remember which newspaper it was, that came out on Wednesday after the budget. It said, "Our capital, his gain," and meaning Jim Chalmers' gain. Our capital, his gain, and that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, that's a good one. The other point I would make is that I really think moving forward with these capital gains tax changes, and probably more of an extent to the negative gearing changes, I think there'll be more of a move to positive cash flow property, and we've always been about positive cash flow property, and that's why I said, early on in this podcast that the negative gearing thing doesn't really affect us because of our focus on positive cash flow, positive geared. So I think moving forward there will be a more of a flight to positive cash flow, because it's going to be the only way that you're going to be able to afford property. There's no other options. So I did hear somewhere on YouTube that they said smaller markets, like small, property, small positively geared, you know, property in small towns and that sort of thing, which is where we focus on. They said that there could be a bit of a pullback in the property prices in the short term, because there's going to be a lot of shuffling assets around over the next 12 months. And those who want to sell because of these new rules that sort of want to sell before they come in will all sell sort of around the same time. So that it could sort of flood the market a little bit in these smaller markets. But I think that will only be short-lived, because that might sort of happen over the next 12 months. And then after that, I think that's when investors are going to start to look around and say, well, we need to now focus on positive cash flow properties rather than the negative, because they're losing the negative gear and benefits. So I think for us in our markets, and if that scenario does play out, it's probably going to mean that property prices will dip a bit over the next 12 months, which is going to give the rest of us a good buying opportunity. And then after that, the prices will go back up again, because demand is going to be there from other investors. So I really think that where we invest is going to win in the long run, and I think we'll be winning as it dips, because it'll give us buying opportunities, and then we'll win again as it goes back up because of demand. So yeah, that's probably closing thought that I'd finish up with.
And this is it. There is always a silver lining. It's not about going to the corner and sulking because this is what the government's done to us. It's about, it's about finding a way around it. Like understanding how you can adjust your personal investing strategy to a new way. The thing is that, like, even though, we might not like, what the government is trying to do to us, these, like, us classed as the aspiration Australians, we still have to work with it, and we still have a place to be upbeat and to be optimistic and truly believe in the wealth that we can create. And the other thing that it's really, really punched home is the need to be diversified. And so the reason why I say that is that even though the likes of like for your capital gains, that's across the board. So whether it's a business capital gain, whether it's, shares or crypto or property, as we've been speaking, that's across the board. But the thing is, if we were in property only, if that was our base, like investment property only, if that was our base, our only income, then we'd be probably in a very, very stressed situation right now. But because we're diversified and we've got different businesses and different companies, and we've got different structures set up here and there, and we've got different income streams coming from different areas, it balances the playing field, so to speak. And I guess it really rides home being diversified is one of our main focus points, because you don't want to be heavily weighted into one thing. Everybody who's got a significant property portfolio that's heavily negatively geared, well, all of a sudden that's been blown out of the water because that strategy no longer holds water. And so yeah, it's just about not losing the optimism, but also having your eyes open to how to the powerful tool that being diversified is.
Yeah, it's definitely right, because like we were just sort of talking amongst ourselves the night of the budget, and we're like, tomorrow is going to be just a carnage, because these people, like Kahlia is talking about, who have a strategy of buying negative geared properties because that's always what they've done, and they might have done that strategy for the last 10 or 20 years, and they've probably got VAs in the Philippines working on looking for properties, and they've trained these VAs to look for the particular property that pencils the best, and all that sort of thing. Well, the next day it would have been, well, hang on, everybody stop, and we've all got to regroup and come up with a new plan. And yeah, like, and this is, Carly and I were actually talking about this afternoon, even because, like I said before, these rules aren't actually, they haven't been passed yet.
No, they're not in effect
So
yet.
yeah, but if it happens like they say they're going to happen, so the negative gearing, for instance, that's all going to come to a halt. So if you go and buy a property next week, you can negative gear that property all the way until the 1st of July next year. But then it's all over after that. So unless you can get that property to pencil positively in 12 months, that's not going to work for you anymore. So
and the thing to remember, like, just on the point that it's not actually, these changes haven't come into they haven't passed Parliament yet. But the thing that we've got to remember is, in Australia here, the Labor government has got a thumping majority. They don't need any support to get this rubbish through. It will go through with flying colours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but the amount of backlash that's happened, they're just as liable to tweak it a bit. So anybody with a strategy will be saying, well, do we keep buying for the time being, just on the off chance that it's not going to happen? Or do we just stop buying altogether until we have some clarity? Or do we start looking for positive geared property and just sort of on the context that these rules are going to flow through as they are without being changed at all? Like the uncertainty in the market at the moment is untold.
Yeah.
And like I said to start with, it's not just property. Like it's across the board. It's on shares and everything. But it's just that we sort of decided to focus this episode on property because that's sort of probably what we're most familiar with. So it's complete chaos in the Australian investments overall.
Do you even think of the educators who
definitely
educate, like, if their thesis is negatively gearing property, if that's what their education business is built on, well, they've got no business anymore. It's all blown out of the water because there's no such thing as being negatively geared moving forward. So the whole thing, all that time, all that content, all that building up,
books
means
nothing.
Yeah,
I'm just wondering how many books now need to be thrown in the bin because it's all been focused on the capital gains and negative gearing as it stands. Well, now you basically got to throw them books away because they mean nothing, and the authors need to go back and rewrite them all. So,
yeah,
it's chaos.
Yeah.
It's complete chaos.
And this is it. Like, it's been a pretty doom and gloom podcast, but ultimately, I think as a closing comment, all I could say is to not lose the optimism. Like, we haven't lost our optimism because we see that there's still so much potential out there for investment and for business and, for the whole lot. So there's no point in losing our optimism. It's about finding new ways. And that's what we have to strive for. We have to find new ways to build our wealth, to become sovereign in our own little wealth pot, and to ultimately build up to what we want it to be. Yeah.
You just got to play the game.
Yeah, you do.
That's all it comes down to. And if that game changes, then you just play it as it changes. It's just about playing the game. So.
And as Nat said before, part of playing the game is building a good team around you, finding a really good broker, finding a really good accountant, finding a really good solicitor, those who understand what you want to achieve and understand, your asset base and where you're going. It's all about, how can you lay the stones? Like, don't lose the optimism, just start to build up to whatever it is that you're building to.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Rightio, I think we'll leave it there. You don't have anything more to
No, I don't think so. No.
Okie doke. We'll leave it there and keep living the dream.